What's going on, guys? Hope everybody's having a great day. Please do me a favor, smash that like button for me, and if you get anything from this video, subscribe. So let's talk about the arraignment today of Bryan Kohberger. He decided that he was not going to plead in the case, that the court would make the plea for him. It's called standing silent. He chose to stand silent. What type of person would choose to not even say, "I'm not guilty," when being accused of such a horrendous crime? Please tell me how it could benefit Bryan Kohberger to not say not guilty. I mean, yeah, of course, in the court system, they're not allowed to use your silence as an admission of guilt. But in the court of public opinion, you refusing to even plead not guilty sets off alarm bells, does it not? I mean, I've put a lot of time into this case where I'm looking through at what's being said by the mainstream media and the narrative going with that. And the whole time I felt like, yeah, they have a pretty strong case against Kohberger if what's being said is true. But I've constantly thrown in that if what's being said is true, if the evidence that we're being told they have actually exists, if the people, the witnesses, the testimony that has been given is accurate and truthful. And I'm not the only person that has had this opinion. Kaylee's father, Steve Gonzalez, has said all the way up until a couple of days ago, if this is the right guy, right? So we don't know if Bryan Kohberger is the right guy. We don't know if he is the only guy. We don't know if he's the only person, not necessarily a guy, right? We don't know if anybody else is involved in this or not. We don't know if what they're saying about him just happens to be these weird quirks that he has. But what kind of weird quirk do you have that you're accused of quadruple homicide, brutal quadruple homicide, and you don't even stand up and say not guilty at your arraignment? Now, I know there's been some people and they're like, well, that's Bryan Kohberger and he's giving the birds to the court system because this is such an unjust charge against him. That wouldn't make a lot of sense, because if he's given the birds to the court system, the judge clearly says before he asks Kohberger any questions that you can remain silent through this hearing and no part of your silence will be used against you. You have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
You also have the right of silence. That right is protected under the Idaho and federal constitutions, so you can remain silent throughout these court proceedings, and that can't be held against you in any way.
But Bryan Kohberger agrees to that. He agrees that he understands the charges. He agrees that he understands the repercussions, what he's facing. He goes through, he answers plenty of yes and no questions, right?
Do you understand the charge in count one, burglary?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count two, murder in the first degree?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count three, murder in the first degree?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count four, murder in the first degree?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count five, murder in the first degree? Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
But when it comes time for him to say guilty or not guilty, he stands silent.
Okay, Ms. Taylor, is Mr. Kohberger prepared to plead to these charges?
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
Okay, because Mr. Kohberger is standing silent, I'm going to enter not guilty pleas on each charge.
The court enters a not guilty plea because he stands silent. The only thing that I can see that he could benefit from that is if he's planning on pleading not guilty by way of insanity. Maybe he's hoping for a plea deal, hoping that they extend an olive branch and say, we'll give you life in prison instead of the death penalty if you just plead guilty, so he can plead guilty later, right? Maybe, but I still don't see how that would stop him from pleading not guilty right now while he doesn't have that. I don't see how it could look good for him in any way, shape, form, or fashion for him to not say not guilty. I feel like if I was to get on here right now and start trying to look for ways that Bryan Kohberger might not be guilty, then I'm being ridiculous, because Bryan Kohberger himself won't even say that he's not guilty. If he won't stand up and say, I'm not guilty, why am I going to stand up and say he's not guilty? Why would I? What sense would that make? Now, I've also heard people say that he's using this as a way to invalidate the trial altogether, to say that he didn't even plead because the case against him was so unjust. He just didn't want to be part of it. But he's going to be part of it. And I know that there's going to be people, and they're going to get upset when I say this, but it's up to him and his defense to thwart the prosecution's attempt to convict him. Now, the burden of proof falls on the prosecution. Bryan Kohberger does not have to prove that he's innocent of these crimes. He doesn't have to prove that he's not guilty of these crimes, right? The prosecution has to prove that he is guilty of it beyond a reasonable doubt. But it's going to be very easy for the prosecution to prove that he's guilty of these crimes beyond a reasonable doubt if he gives no resistance. If he sits back and says, I'm so confident that you can't prove that I'm guilty that I'm not even going to defend against what you're saying about me. You're saying I did this. I'm not even going to say I didn't do it. I'm just going to say, well, prove I did it then. I'm sure that's going to play really well with the jury. Because, yes, the jury should be impartial. Yes, the burden of proof should be on the prosecution. But if the prosecution gets up and they lay out a narrative, and that's a believable narrative, and the evidence aligns with that narrative, and it makes sense to the jury, and Bryan Kohberger's team doesn't get up and give them something else that makes sense, some other reason that things could be the way they are without him being guilty, then that jury is not going to have a hard time at all finding Bryan Kohberger guilty. I mean, we have the way the system works, where the burden of proof falls on the prosecution, and they have to prove it without a reasonable doubt. And if they can't prove it beyond that reasonable doubt, then the suspect, the defendant, he gets to walk. But it's not hard to prove if the defendant doesn't put up a fight. It's not hard to convince people when they're only hearing one side of a story, when they're only hearing one narrative of that night. The fact that Bryan Kohberger refused to stand up and say not guilty is a slap in the face to anybody who's been defending him. And it blows my mind that people watch that happen and still come back and defend him and say, well, he's doing it for this reason or he's doing it for that reason. You don't know. You don't know why he didn't say guilty or not guilty. There is no immediately clear reason why he wouldn't say not guilty. There is no immediately clear avenue that he could be trying to go down with this. It just makes no sense. I can't figure it out. I have spent the whole rest of the day, ever since the arraignment, thinking about this. Thinking about what could he be trying to play at. And the best answers that I've got so far is that he doesn't even want to acknowledge this case. right? The case is so bad, he's just going to give fingers to the prosecution and not even enter a plea because he thinks it's that ridiculous. But the victims' families, they were in that room today. Just because the prosecutors are accusing you of this crime and you feel that that's unjust, is it so much for you to say not guilty when they ask how do you plead that you're accused of these crimes? If nothing else, but to let the families know that, hey, y'all got the wrong guy. I'm not that guy. It seems like by refusing to even enter a plea, refusing to say guilty or not guilty, that you're not even willing to tell the courts, I'm not him. Why not? Why not? Now, while we're speaking about the courts, how disrespectful and unprofessional was it that Judge called Kayla multiple times, even corrected himself, but said Kayla again.
This alleges that you, on or about November 13, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Kayla Gonzalez, a human being, by stabbing Kayla Gonzalez, from which she died.
How is that possible? This is the most popular case in the country right now. The most reported on case in the country. And it's going on in your district where you're the district judge. This is your case now. And you don't even know the names of the victims? 3 times he said Kayla instead of Kaylee. And then when he got to Xana's name, he absolutely butchered her name.
Count 4, murder in the first degree. That's a felony under Idaho Code Section 18-4001, 4002, 4003, and 4004. Alleging that you, on or about November 13, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Zana Kernodle. Excuse me. This is hard. I'm sorry. Zana Kernodle, a human being, by stabbing Zana Kernodle, from which she died.
That was absolutely ridiculous. It's like he's never even heard it spoken before. How? It's like he's never even read it to pronounce it before. How? This is a huge case in your district that you're presiding over, and you can't say Xana Kernodle? When he said, it's hard, I saw a lot of people and a lot of the media try to push that as him saying, this is hard to even talk about. But I felt like when he said that, he was saying her name's hard to say. Kaylee Gonzalez was hard to say. Xana Kernodle was hard to say. And if you noticed during that time, while he was saying Kaylee's name wrong, Kohberger's jaw was clenching a little bit. And then during the whole ridiculous mess that was him trying to say Xana's name time after time after time, Kohberger reacted so different during that. Like he kept looking back up at the judge and clenching his jaw and looking down and doing the little thing with his lips. Now, I'm not a body language expert. I don't know what any of that means, but it felt uncomfortable, right? Now, I'm not saying that Bryan Kohberger would have felt uncomfortable because, well, he definitely did it, right? We don't know that for sure. I'm not telling you that Bryan Kohberger is guilty. I'm saying I believe that he's guilty. It is my opinion that he is guilty. Why is it my opinion that he is guilty? Well, because we know he's followed the case. We know he knows all these things that have been said, whether they're true or not. And he doesn't even feel it's necessary to put in a not guilty plea. He doesn't think that he should stand up and say not guilty. That's ridiculous to me. What do you guys think about it? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to see more, hit that notification bell so you'll get notified anytime I post. Have a great day. We'll see you later.